The next item of business this afternoon is topical questions, and I call question number 1, Aileen MacLeod.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how value-based pricing will impact on the availability of orphan and ultra-orphan medicines such as Calideco.
Cabinet Secretary Alex Neil.
Presiding Officer, pricing of medicines is currently a reserved matter, and negotiations on the value-based pricing scheme are ongoing. These proposals are being taken forward by the Department of Health in England and the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry throughout the UK. We hope that agreement on a pricing system which reflects the value of medicines in terms of clinical effectiveness can be achieved, along with the wider contribution that should make to societal benefit and/or meeting unmet needs. In the meantime, work is underway in Scotland to develop a fund to cover the cost of successful individual patient treatment requests for high-cost, low-volume orphan medicines which have not been recommended for routine use by the Scottish Medicines Consortium, such as Calideco. This approach responds to interim advice from the independent expert Professor Charles Swainson, who is leading the strand of work within the New Medicines Review to examine the current IPTR arrangements. The fund will cover the cost of orphan medicines for individual patients for whom there are clear clinical grounds for their prescription through the IPTR arrangements. The fund of £21 million will be available from the 1st of March 2013 for a period of 13 months until the UK system of value-based pricing is established. The fund is in addition to the existing NHS board funding allocations, and it will not be applied retrospectively. Detailed operational arrangements will be developed and will be announced in due course.
Aileen MacLeod.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that comprehensive response? And in light of what he just said, does the Cabinet Secretary share my concerns that Calideco was offered at a higher cost in Scotland than it was in England? And can he therefore give any insight into the impact of the higher cost on the decisions made by the Scottish Medicines Consortium?
Alex Neil.
Presiding Officer, I am concerned that any pharmaceutical company would offer their drugs at a more expensive rate than they do south of the border. The SMCs are independent and publish the detail of their decision on their website, which also includes reference to cost. Calideco's manufacturer, Vertex Pharmaceuticals, have indicated that they will be resubmitting the drug to the SMC with a patient access scheme as it was in England. Clearly, it's a matter for the SMC to carry out the reassessment of the drug once it has been submitted. But I would observe that specialised commission groups who carried out the drug's assessment during the first assessment were clear that without the patient access scheme discount, the quality ratio would have been more than the range that NICE has set out for ultra-orphan drugs.
Aileen MacLeod.
Thanks very much. Given the Cabinet Secretary said earlier that medicines pricing is currently a reserved matter, can the Cabinet Secretary explain then what the role of the Scottish Government has in the development of a value-based pricing model for new medicines?
Alex Neil.
Presiding Officer, Scottish Government officials are in regular contact with the Department of Health, and I've written to Jeremy Hunt to seek a meeting to discuss value-based pricing and its impact on access to new medicines in Scotland. We support the principle of value-based pricing, but like many patient groups, we're still seeking greater clarity and detail.
Jackie Bailey.
Can I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's announcement about this new fund? Can he advise when the fund will actually be established and open to applications? But does he agree with me that the effectiveness will be curtailed if the individual patient treatment request system isn't currently working for the benefit of patients? And does he see that as sufficient, the current system as sufficient to guarantee access to Calideco for patients who need it?
Alex Neil.
Presiding Officer, the fund will start from the 1st of March 2013, and yesterday I wrote to all the 14 territorial health boards to point out and remind them about a similar circular they received last year from the then Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon, asking them to process and turn around individual patient treatment requests speedily and do it expeditiously. very clearly, particularly when it's an issue like cystic fibrosis or cancer or other conditions, time is always of the essence, and boards should take that into consideration to ensure that they deal with these applications very timely.
James Kelly.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware of the case of Maisie Black, a constituent of mine, a cystic fibrosis sufferer who is much in need of Calideco. And yesterday's decision from SMC and the welcome announcement from the Cabinet Secretary of the Drugs Fund brings this issue into focus. Can I ask for some clarification around how the application process will work? And specifically, can I ask whether the Cabinet Secretary can guarantee that anyone who makes an application who has a proven clinical need for Calideco will be granted access to the necessary funding to get provision of the drug?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I actually spoke to Maisie's mother, Tilda Black, yesterday afternoon to make her aware of the announcement that we had made. And Maisie obviously is one of the people who potentially could benefit from this new fund, and there are many others, not just with cystic fibrosis, but indeed with other conditions as well, because obviously the fund relates to any rare drug, not just to this particular drug, which the SMC announced its decision on yesterday. Can I stress that there is no change to the IPTR process itself? It has to be a clinical decision as to whether an individual would benefit from a particular drug. But what I want to make sure of is that money is not a constraint. In other words, if the clinicians agree that an individual should get a particular drug that's not generally available because of the SMC decision, if the clinicians agree the patient should get the drug, then money should not be a constraint on making sure that the patient gets the access to that drug.
Malcolm Chisholm.
I welcome yesterday's announcement, but is it not the case that the IPTR referral criteria have proved extremely difficult to satisfy for orphan medicines? So, can you firstly confirm that the independent appraisal will continue, but can you also assure us that some changes will be made before the 1st of March in order that this money can be accessed?
Cabinet Secretary.
The Presiding Officer, as a member will know, there is an ongoing, very thorough review of the entire process, including the SMC process and the individual patient request process as well. I'm hoping to have the report with recommendations from Professor Routledge, along with the recommendations from Professor Swainson, who's specifically looking at the IPTR process, by the end of February. And if quick changes are required, then I would be more than happy to make those once I see those recommendations.
Question number 2, Ian Gray.
To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to support the workforce of Montgomery-Litho-Ltd following its liquidation.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, this will be an anxious time for the employees of Montgomery-Litho-Ltd and their families, and the Scottish Government will offer them every support possible. I can confirm that the Scottish Government will do everything it can through its Partnership Action for Continuing Employment, that's PACE initiative, to help those employees of Montgomery-Litho who are affected by redundancy. Montgomery-Litho is a well-respected company that had earned its place on the Scottish Government Collaborative Framework for Design, Print, Publishing and Associated Services. Presiding Officer, I have just been advised that the purchase of MLG Glasgow has been announced in the press.
Ian Gray.
I thank the Minister for that answer, and the management buyout protecting some of the jobs in this company is of course welcome, but it will not help in any way the 79 members of staff in my constituency in Haddington whose jobs have gone. I welcome, of course, the implementation of PACE to provide support to that workforce. However, 35 staff in this company were paid off immediately prior to Christmas, so the job loss is actually around 114. And I would ask the Minister if he could, through his good offices, ensure that those 35 staff so recently made redundant can also be included in the PACE approach for the 79 more recent redundancies.
Minister.
Yes, I'm happy to provide that undertaking to Ian Gray. He is perfectly correct in what he says in relation to those who have been made redundant in his own constituency. This will be a bitter experience for them and their families at this time. I am able to say that PACE has been working with the Addington site since October 2012, following receipt of media reports that jobs could be lost at the site, and services were provided by PACE partners in November last year, including benefits advice, job search support, CV preparation advice, money advice and business gateway support. And therefore that intervention was possible because of engagement with the company late last year. It's always beneficial that the intervention of PACE and the invitation to PACE by a company is made at the earliest opportunity to provide employees with as much time as possible to receive advice about alternative options for them, whether that involves training, education opportunities, or indeed seeking other employment. I did state in an adjustment to my written text, Presiding Officer, that I have just been advised that in relation to that part of Montgomery-Litho's business in Glasgow, that a buyer has been secured, and the Joint Provisional Liquidator, Blair Nimmo from KPMG, is quoted in the BBC website as stating that, and I quote, "The sale of the business represents the best possible outcome for the Glasgow operation, which will now continue to trade," being the Glasgow arm of the company. I'm advised in this press release that 76 jobs may be saved as a result of the management buyout. I sought to speak to Mr Nimmo earlier today, but we were unable to make contact with each other. I will be speaking to him at 4 o'clock, I hope, this afternoon, to get a further report, and I will feed back any further information I can get to the member who is quite rightly raising this matter on behalf of his constituents, and I will personally oversee that the efforts by PACE are as good as they always have been, because his constituents deserve nothing less to ensure that they get every possible support at this most difficult of times.
Ian Gray.
I thank the Minister for a very constructive answer, and appreciate that the PACE process is being applied more widely than those who have lost their jobs in the last couple of days. Over 100 jobs in a small town like Haddington is a very significant job loss, but it's not the only job losses we've seen in East Lothian recently. We saw Lothian Fabrics close, Ford's Bakery, jobs losses at First Bus at Musselburgh. Cockenzie Power Station will close within the next few weeks, and there are jobs under threat as well at Bankton Building Services in the county. My constituents need and I appreciate the help that they get from PACE, but they do also need jobs to apply for. And I know of one case recently where someone applied for a job and there were 300 applicants for that job. Can I ask the Minister what help the Scottish Government can offer to East Lothian, the Council or otherwise, to see what new jobs can be created locally to provide opportunities for these constituents?
Minister.
Well, Ian Gray is quite right to point out to the difficulties facing East Lothian. I'm more than happy to meet with East Lothian Council, and indeed I have written to them in connection with other matters, hoping to meet with them to discuss more positive aspects in relation to tourism. But I will certainly take that opportunity, if with their agreement, to meet and discuss with them what more can be done. I would point out that the record of PACE in Scotland is pretty formidably good. I chair the meetings where PACE bring together their partners in order to make sure that we do everything we can as Team Scotland to help those who are in the situation of being made redundant. The PACE Client Experience Survey, which brings together the total results of their input throughout Scotland, has reported in relation to October 2010 that almost two-thirds of PACE service users who left their redundant job role had either found new employment or undertaken training or development. I understand that the more recent survey will show an improvement of that figure of nearly two-thirds. That's a pretty good record. It can be improved, and there are steps that we're taking to do that. But I think there is a message of hope for those who are in the experience of facing redundancy at this time, at this difficult economic time. And there are jobs available in parts of Scotland. But in some parts of Scotland, as Ian Gray has rightly pointed out, there are particular difficulties for people seeking re-employment, and therefore we will continue to do absolutely everything, working with Scottish Enterprise and others, to help those find other jobs to replace those which they've lost.
Thank you. We now move on